never told my daughter about my $75,000 in monthly income, and I never corrected her when she assumed I was barely scraping by. I never mentioned that I had been a cardiothoracic surgeon for 32 years, that I had sold my private practice 3 years ago for $5 million, or that my investment portfolio now generated more in a month than most families earned in a year. I let her see the modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, the clothes from consignment stores, the coupon clipping, the home-cooked meals instead of restaurants. I let her believe what she wanted to believe. Why? Because I wanted to raise a daughter who understood the difference between having money and being defined by it. I wanted her to know that a person's worth isn't measured by the size of their house or the label on their handbag. I wanted her to build her own life, her own success, without leaning on mine. And for 28 years, that approach had worked beautifully. My Emma grew up grounded, hardworking, and kind. She put herself through college, built a career in marketing, never asked me for a dime beyond what a normal parent would give. But then she met David Park. David was 32, an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, and by all accounts, a decent man. He treated Emma well, made her laugh, supported her ambitions. I had no issue with David himself. It was his family that concerned me. From the stories Emma shared, I could piece together the picture clearly. Old money, Connecticut estate, country club memberships, the kind of people who measured others by their tax bracket and their alma mater. Emma had been nervous about introducing me to them. I could hear it in her voice when she called. "Mom, David's parents want to meet you. They're inviting us to their place in the Hamptons for a long weekend. The whole family will be there. It's kind of a big deal." I could hear what she wasn't saying. She was worried. Worried that I wouldn't fit in, that I wouldn't measure up to whatever standards the Parks had set. Worried that somehow I would be the reason things fell apart. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart," I told her. "When?" "Next month. The first weekend in October." "Mom, I should tell you, they're very formal, and they have certain expectations. David's sister can be a bit sharp. His mother is very particular about things. Emma, I've survived 3 decades in operating rooms with egos the size of Manhattan. I think I can handle a weekend in the Hamptons." But here's what I didn't tell her. I wasn't going to that weekend to be judged. I was going to do the judging. I needed to see what kind of people the Parks really were, and I had a theory about the best way to find out. People show you who they really are when they think they have power over you. They show you their true character when they believe you're beneath them. So I made a decision. I would play the role they expected. I would be the struggling single mother, the woman who had worked hard but never quite made it, the potential embarrassment they would need to manage. I would give them every opportunity to reveal their true selves. And Emma? I called her back the next day. "Honey, I need to tell you something. I think we should let your future in-laws see who we really are. No pretense, no trying to impress anyone. I'll come as I am. If they can't accept that, better to know now, don't you think?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mom, what are you planning?" "Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just saying that if they're going to be family, they should meet the real us, the real me." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Mom, are you testing them?" My daughter was smarter than I sometimes gave her credit for. "Maybe," I admitted. "Would that bother you?" I could almost hear her thinking. Then she laughed, a small, slightly nervous laugh. "Actually, no. I've been worried about how they'll treat you. David keeps telling me his parents are lovely, but some of the things his sister has said. I don't know, Mom. Maybe it would be good to know what we're dealing with." "So you're okay with this?" "I'm okay with this. But Mom, if things get ugly, we're leaving. Deal?" "Deal." And just like that, my daughter became my co-conspirator. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. I took the train to East Hampton, declining David's offer to have their driver pick me up. I arrived at the address David had given me with a single, small suitcase, wearing comfortable slacks from a discount store and a plain blouse. No jewelry except my late husband's wedding ring, which I still wore on a chain around my neck. The house was not a house. It was an estate. Pristine white exterior, manicured hedges, a circular driveway with a fountain in the center. 3 cars parked in front, all of them German and expensive. I stood there for a moment, taking it in, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman in her late 50s stood there, blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing cream-colored linen that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Patricia Park. I recognized her from the photos Emma had shown me. "You must be Margaret," she said. Her smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes were already scanning me, from my discount store clothes to my scuffed practical shoes to my single small suitcase. I could see the assessment happening in real time. The slight tightening around her mouth, the barely perceptible drawing back. "Mrs. Park," I said warmly, extending my hand. "Thank you so much for inviting me. What a beautiful home." She shook my hand briefly, her grip limp and brief. "Please, call me Patricia. Come in. Everyone's out on the terrace." The inside of the house matched the outside. Everything white and cream and expensive, hardwood floors that gleamed, art on the walls that looked original, fresh flowers in crystal vases. We walked through the foyer, through a living room that looked like it had never been lived in, and out to a terrace that overlooked the ocean. Emma jumped up the moment she saw me, relief visible on her face. She hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "You made it. Are you okay?" "I'm perfect, honey," I whispered back. David stood and shook my hand warmly. "Margaret, so good to see you again. Let me introduce you to everyone." The man standing next to him was clearly his father, Richard Park, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that came from years of being the most important person in every room. He shook my hand with a firm grip, his eyes also assessing, though he was better at hiding it than his wife. "Margaret, we've heard so much about you. All good, I hope," I said lightly. "Of course," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The third person on the terrace was a woman in her early 30s, dark-haired, beautiful in the way that required significant time and money to maintain, David's sister, Melissa. She looked up from her phone long enough to give me a once-over, her eyes lingering on my clothes with unconcealed amusement. "Hi," she said flatly, not bothering to stand or offer her hand. "Nice to meet you." "You too, Melissa. David's told Emma wonderful things about his sister." She smirked. "Has he?" The first hour passed with polite conversation. They asked careful questions about my life, and I answered honestly. I told them about my apartment in Queens, about my simple lifestyle, about how I preferred cooking at home to eating out. I told them I had been widowed 15 years ago, that I had worked hard to raise Emma on my own. I watched their faces as I spoke, watched the subtle exchanges of glances, the slight nods, the way Patricia's expression became more and more fixed. They were drawing conclusions, exactly the conclusions I wanted them to draw. Dinner that first evening was served in a formal dining room. A woman I hadn't met, presumably household staff, brought out course after course. The table was set with china that probably cost more than my monthly rent, real rent, not the modest amount I let people believe I paid. As we ate, the conversation flowed around me. They talked about their recent trip to the Amalfi Coast, about the charity gala Patricia was organizing, about Richard's latest business acquisition. They asked Emma polite questions about her work, though I noticed they never asked what she earned or what her ambitions were. They acted as though her career was a pleasant hobby, something to pass the time until she married David and could focus on more important things. I was seated at one end of the table, with Melissa to my left. She had been on her phone for most of the meal, barely participating in conversation. Then, suddenly, she looked at me. "So, Margaret, where did you say you live again?" "Queens," I said. "A nice little apartment near the park." "Queens," she repeated, as though I had said I lived in a dumpster. "That must be cozy." "It suits me," I replied calmly. "I bet." "And you rent?" "I do." She nodded slowly, that same smirk playing at her lips. "Must be tough, at your age, still renting. No nest egg to fall back on?" Patricia made a small sound of disapproval, though whether she was disapproving of Melissa's rudeness or of my financial situation, I couldn't tell. "Melissa," David said sharply. "What?" "I'm just making conversation." She turned back to me, her eyes wide with false innocence. "I mean, it's admirable, really. Working your whole life and still having to worry about making rent. That takes real perseverance." I took a sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Then I smiled. It does, doesn't it? Perseverance is an important quality. I'm glad Emma learned it from me. The second day, things escalated. Patricia invited me for what she called a little chat in her sitting room while the others went down to the beach. The sitting room was all cream furniture and soft lighting, with French doors that opened onto a garden. She poured tea from a silver service and handed me a delicate cup that I was half afraid to hold. "Margaret, I wanted to talk to you privately," she began, her tone gentle but firm. "Mother to mother." "Of course," I said. "I can see that you're a proud woman, and I respect that. You've done your best raising Emma on your own, and she's turned out to be a lovely girl. David adores her." "I'm glad to hear that, but I think we need to be realistic about the situation here." She leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. "Our families come from very different backgrounds, very different circumstances, and while that doesn't matter to the young people, we adults need to think about the practical implications." "What kind of implications?" "Well, for instance, living arrangements. I assume you'll want to continue living independently, which is admirable. But have you thought about what happens as you get older? Have you made plans for senior living? For health care?" I set my teacup down carefully. "I appreciate your concern, Patricia, but I'm managing just fine." "Are you, though?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I've done some research on housing options for seniors in the New York area. There are some very nice communities, very affordable, that might be more suitable for you than trying to maintain an apartment in Queens." "You've researched senior housing for me?" "I just want to help," she said quickly. "I know how hard it must be, trying to make ends meet on a limited income, and I don't want Emma to feel burdened by having to worry about you. She should be focused on building her life with David, not concerned about whether her mother can afford her rent." There it was, the first real strike. Not concern for me, but concern that I would be a burden on Emma, that I would be an embarrassment, a responsibility they would have to shoulder. I smiled pleasantly. "That's very thoughtful of you, Patricia. I'll certainly keep it in mind." She seemed relieved, as though she had accomplished what she set out to do. "Good. I'm so glad we could talk openly about this. I think it's important that we're all on the same page going forward." That evening at dinner, Richard made his move. We were having cocktails before the meal, standing around the terrace as the sun set over the ocean. Richard pulled me aside, his hand on my elbow, guiding me away from the others. "Margaret, I wonder if I could have a word." "Of course." He led me to the far end of the terrace, where we could speak without being overheard. He faced me, his expression serious. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you appreciate directness. I've built my career on making smart decisions, on understanding situations clearly and addressing them efficiently." "I can respect that," I said. "Good. Then you'll understand what I'm about to say. Patricia and I have been talking, and we want to make sure that when David and Emma get married, they start their life together on the strongest possible foundation. No distractions, no unnecessary complications." "I'm not sure I follow." "I think you do." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "We know that finances can be difficult, especially for someone in your position. We know that Emma probably feels obligated to help you, to support you, and that's admirable. But it's not fair to her. It's not fair to make her choose between taking care of her mother and building her future." He held out the envelope to me. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "It's a check for $100,000. More than enough for you to secure your future, to set yourself up comfortably wherever you choose to live. Consider it a gift, a way of making sure that Emma can move forward without any worries." I didn't take the envelope. I just looked at it, then at him. "You're offering me money to do what, exactly?" "To step back," he said simply. "To let Emma live her life without the constant concern about whether her mother is okay. To give her the freedom to fully integrate into our family without divided loyalties." The word hung in the air between us. Loyalties. "You want me to take your money and disappear from my daughter's life. I want you to take this money and build your own life, independently, so that Emma doesn't have to worry about you anymore. It's for her benefit, Margaret. Surely you can see that." I looked out at the ocean, at the waves rolling in, constant and inevitable. I thought about Emma inside, probably watching this conversation through the window, probably knowing exactly what was happening. I thought about the small notebook in my bag, where I had been writing down every comment, every suggestion, every insult disguised as concern. "That's very generous of you, Richard," I said finally. "Can I think about it?" He looked surprised, as though he had expected either immediate acceptance or immediate offense. "Of course. Take your time, but I hope you'll consider what's best for Emma." The third day was the breaking point. We were having brunch on the terrace, all of us together for the last meal before Emma and I were scheduled to leave. The conversation had been light, superficial, everyone carefully avoiding any mention of the previous day's conversations. Then Melissa decided to break the careful peace. "So, Margaret, have you and Mom talked about the wedding yet?" I looked at Patricia, who suddenly seemed very interested in her mimosa. "Not yet," I said. "Oh, you should." Melissa smiled brightly, maliciously. "I'm sure there are lots of details to discuss. Like, for instance, what the mother of the groom traditionally pays for versus the mother of the bride. I know things have changed these days, but it used to be that the bride's family covered most of the costs." "Melissa," David said warningly. "What? I'm just saying. I mean, obviously, in this case, we'd want to handle everything. We wouldn't want anyone to feel pressured to contribute beyond their means." She looked directly at me. "It must be such a relief, knowing you won't have to worry about any of that, knowing that Emma is marrying into a family that can take care of everything." Patricia set down her glass. "What Melissa is trying to say, in her own way, is that we want this wedding to be perfect, and we're more than happy to cover all the expenses. We wouldn't want Emma to have to compromise on her special day because of budgetary concerns." Richard nodded. "It's settled then. We'll handle everything. The venue, the catering, the flowers. Patricia has already started making calls. We're thinking the Yale Club in Manhattan. Very elegant, very appropriate." I noticed he didn't ask Emma what she wanted. Didn't ask if she had dreamed of a different kind of wedding. He simply decided. Emma was looking at me, her expression unreadable. I could see the anger in her eyes, the hurt, but also something else. She was waiting to see what I would do. I set down my fork very carefully. I took a sip of water. I looked at each of them in turn. Richard, so confident in his control. Patricia, so certain of her superiority. Melissa, so pleased with her little barbs. And David, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing, doing nothing. "Before we discuss wedding plans," I said quietly, "I think there's something I should share with all of you." Patricia smiled. "Of course, dear. What is it?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I had prepared before coming here. I set it on the table in front of me. "I appreciate your concern about my financial situation. I really do. And I appreciate the various offers of help that have been made this weekend. The suggestions about senior housing, the generous check Richard offered me yesterday, the relief that you won't have to worry about me contributing to the wedding expenses." Richard's face went very still. Patricia's smile froze. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding, and it's my fault for not being clearer about my circumstances. You see, I let you make assumptions about me. I let you believe that I was struggling, that I was barely getting by, that I would be a burden on Emma, and I did that deliberately because I wanted to see what kind of people you really are." I opened the folder. "I'm not a struggling single mother barely making rent in Queens. Well, I do live in Queens. That part is true. But I live there by choice, not necessity. I'm a retired cardiothoracic surgeon. I practiced for 32 years, the last 15 as head of cardiovascular surgery at Mount Sinai. I sold my private practice 3 years ago for $5 million. I pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. It was the sale agreement, clearly showing the purchase price. I currently own 8 residential properties in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. Their combined value is approximately $8 million. I slid across the property portfolio. I have a diversified investment portfolio managed by Morgan Stanley. Current value, approximately $12 million. The monthly income from these investments alone is $75,000. I pulled out the investment statements, all recent, all official. So when you researched senior housing for me, Patricia, I appreciate the thought, but I actually own the building where I currently live. When you offered me $100,000 to step back from my daughter's life, Richard, that's not quite 2 months of income for me. And when you so generously offered to pay for the wedding, let me be clear, I could buy the Yale Club if I wanted to. The silence at the table was absolute. Patricia had gone pale. Richard's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles jumping. Melissa was staring at me, her mouth slightly open. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. But here's the thing, I continued, my voice still quiet, still calm. I didn't come here to wave my bank statements around or to prove anything about my net worth. I came here because Emma was worried about meeting you, about whether you would accept her, accept us. And I decided to conduct a little experiment. I wanted to see what kind of people you are when you think someone is beneath you. I wanted to see how you treat people you think are poor, struggling, vulnerable. I looked at each of them again, and you failed. All of you. You looked at someone you thought was poor, and you saw a burden, an embarrassment, a problem to be managed. You tried to buy me off, to push me away, to ensure I wouldn't contaminate your perfect family with my poverty. You spoke to me with pity and contempt. You made assumptions about my worth, based on my zip code and my clothes. Patricia found her voice. Now wait just a minute. No. I cut her off, still calm, still quiet. You wait. I spent 32 years in operating rooms holding human hearts in my hands. I've seen people at their most vulnerable, most desperate, most afraid. And I learned something fundamental. Money doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you kinder or wiser or more valuable as a human being. Character does that. Decency does that. And this weekend, you showed me that despite all your wealth, despite all your advantages, you have neither. I stood up, gathering my folder. Emma, sweetheart, I think it's time we left. Emma stood immediately, relief and pride mixing on her face. But David reached out and grabbed her hand. Emma, wait, please. Let's talk about this. She looked at him for a long moment. What's there to talk about, David? They didn't mean I'm sure they'll apologize. Right? He looked desperately at his parents. But Richard was not apologizing. He was staring at me, his face red, his eyes hard. You deceived us. You came into our home under false pretenses, and you judged us. I gave you every opportunity to show me who you really are, I said. And you did. That's not deception. That's revelation. We were only trying to help, Patricia started. No, Emma cut in, and her voice was steel. You weren't trying to help. You were trying to manage what you saw as a problem. You were trying to buy my mother out of my life because you thought she wasn't good enough for your family. And the only reason you're upset now is because it turns out she has more money than you do. Emma, that's not fair, David said. Isn't it? She pulled her hand from his. Did you hear the things your sister said? Did you hear your father offer my mother money to disappear? And you said nothing. You did nothing. I didn't know they were going to. But you knew, didn't you? You knew they would look down on her. That's why you were nervous about this weekend. That's why you kept warning me that your family has certain expectations. You knew exactly who they are, and you hoped it wouldn't be too bad, that maybe they'd hide it well enough that we could all pretend. David looked at his parents, then back at Emma. I could see the decision happening on his face. I could see him weighing his options, his loyalties, his future, and I could see the moment he chose. Emma, they're my parents. They're family. I can't just... Yes, Emma said softly. They're family, and you're choosing them. She pulled off the engagement ring and set it on the table next to the property documents. Thank you for a lovely weekend. It was very educational. We walked out together, leaving them sitting there in shocked silence. We didn't speak until we were in the car Emma had called, heading back toward the city. Then Emma laughed, a slightly wild sound that was half relief and half disbelief. Mom, that was incredible. Did you see their faces when you pulled out those statements? I did, I said. Why didn't you tell me? About all of it, I mean. I knew you were comfortable, but $12 million? I looked at her. Would it have changed anything? She thought about that. No, she said finally. No, it wouldn't have. You're still my mom. You still lived in that apartment and clipped coupons and taught me that money isn't what makes you valuable. Exactly. But Mom, you could have had anything. You could have lived anywhere. Why Queens? Why the modest apartment? Why let me think you were just getting by? Because I didn't want money to be the story of your life. I didn't want you to grow up entitled, or to think that wealth was something you inherited rather than something you earned. I wanted you to know what it felt like to work hard, to build something yourself, to make your own way, and you did. You're making $50,000 a year and you're proud of it, and you should be. You earned every dollar. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I would have married him, if they had been nice to you. Even if you really were struggling, I would have married him. I know. But seeing them like that, seeing him do nothing, I couldn't. Is that wrong? Should I have given him another chance? I took her hand. You gave him every chance. He chose to protect his parents' pride instead of standing up for you, for us, for what's right. That tells you everything you need to know. I thought he was different. Maybe he was. Or maybe he just hid it better. Either way, better to know now than after the wedding. We rode in silence for a while. Then Emma said, So what now? Now? Now you heal. You grieve what you thought you had. You rebuild. And maybe, eventually, you find someone who would have stood up and said, That's not okay. That's not how we treat people. Someone like Dad? I smiled, thinking of my late husband. He had been a teacher, made a modest salary, drove a beat-up old car, but he had been the best man I ever knew. Yes, someone like your father. 6 months later, Emma was dating someone new. His name was James. He taught high school English, and he drove a 10-year-old Honda. The first time she brought him to meet me, I made dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and good conversation. He asked me about my career, listened with genuine interest, and never once made the conversation about money or status. When Emma excused herself to take a phone call, he helped me clear the dishes without being asked. Your daughter is amazing, he told me as we stood at the sink. She is, I agreed. She told me about what happened with her ex-fiancé's family, about how you tested them. I tensed slightly. And what do you think about that? He smiled. I think I'm glad you're not testing me, because I'm not sure I'd be clever enough to pass. But I also think that if I were you, I'd have done the exact same thing. Sometimes the only way to see the truth is to take away the polish and see what's underneath. I decided I liked James. A year after that, Emma launched her own marketing firm. I was her first investor, though she didn't know that until later. She thought she had gotten a business loan from a bank. It was actually me, through a shell company, because I wanted her to succeed on her own terms, not because her mother paid for it. Her firm specialized in working with small businesses, the kind that couldn't afford the big agencies but needed good marketing to compete. She was successful, not because of my money, but because she was talented and hardworking and knew what it felt like to struggle and to succeed. She married James 2 years after they met. The wedding was at a small restaurant in Brooklyn, nothing like the Yale Club extravaganza the Parks had planned. 75 guests, string lights, and a food truck serving tacos. Emma wore a simple dress from a local designer. James cried when he saw her. I sat in the front row and watched my daughter marry a man who loved her for exactly who she was, who didn't care about her income or her background or what she could do for him. A man who stood up when it mattered, who chose her over comfort, over ease, over the path of least resistance. That's what I wanted for her all along. Not wealth, not status, not an impressive last name, just someone who would see her clearly and love her anyway. Someone with character. David tried to reach out a few times after that weekend in the Hamptons. Emma never responded. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he eventually married someone from a suitable family, someone whose mother already belonged to the right clubs and knew the right people. I hoped he was happy. I suspected he wasn't. As for me, I still live in Queens. I still cook most of my meals at home. I still wear practical clothes and live simply, because that's who I am, regardless of what's in my bank account. The money is there if I need it, if Emma needs it, if something matters. But it doesn't define me, and it never will. I spent 32 years holding hearts in my hands, quite literally. I learned that they all look the same, whether they belong to millionaires or janitors. They beat the same way, bleed the same way, break the same way. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy a bigger heart or a better soul. The parks taught me something valuable that weekend, even though they didn't mean to. They taught me that I was right. Right to live simply. Right to teach Emma that character matters more than wealth. Right to test the people who wanted to join our family. Because in the end, when everything else is stripped away, when the houses and cars and bank accounts are meaningless, all that remains is how you treat other people, especially the ones you think can't do anything for you. That's the measure of a person, not their net worth, but their human worth. And on that scale, I'll take my modest apartment in Queens and my daughter's happiness over all the mansions in the Hamptons. Every single time.